Welcome to October, the month of horror. Now, I'm not a big fan of horror movies, but I do like some older horror movies. So that's why, just recently, I bought this case of 50 classic horror movies. These are all from the 20s to 1950s, the old stuff. You have all these different classics, but of course the one I'm talking about today is the one that's on the front cover, and that is The Phantom of the Opera. Most people, when they hear that, they think of the musical and the movie based off of that musical. But this came out long before that, and it's based off of the book. Now, I have read the book. When I was in high school, I read the book. And I watched the movie of it, and it was good. I like the musical itself, not as much the movie off of the musical, but I've always wanted to watch the original. Not the original, but the original adaptation of it from the 1920s. And it's crazy, because I just realized right after watching it, next year, that movie turns 100 years old. Crazy. It's crazy. But is it good? In my opinion, it was fantastic. I loved it. It was just what you want from a horror movie, in my opinion. It's not demonic, but it's scary in a different way. It's one of those things where it would haunt kids less than it would haunt adults, but it's thrilling and it's fun, and it's The Phantom of the Opera, and it's a good adaptation, while most of the movie adaptation of that takes it more as just a musical, and it's not scary. But this is definitely a scary, what The Phantom of the Opera is supposed to be, a scary monster movie. One big thing about this movie that I found really fascinating and really awesome, but a lot of people wouldn't have liked this movie. And so while I would recommend this movie in the same way, I can't recommend it to people, because I get it that a lot of people wouldn't want to watch it. For the most part, I think the graphics actually still holds up somewhat. But the big thing about it is that's going to put a lot of people off. Not silent, quite, but kind of a silent movie. It doesn't have people speaking in it. You do have, people do speak in it. It's you see people's mouth moving, and then it cuts away every once in a while to this screen that says, this is what they said, basically. But you're not getting every single line. You're just getting a couple lines throughout the movie of this person said this, important lines. You're getting dialogue through letters, where you see the letters, and it holds that's a really big thing I'm going to get back to in a minute, but you have these letters and you see what it says on the letters. But one big thing about this is, while it's silent, but it's not silent. It has music in the background. It's a really old movie, so I get it. That's somewhere where it comes from, is that they just had this music. It was just music in the background. But if someone took this movie and edited it to make it better for nowadays, I would say one big thing you could do is just take the movie and add music that matches better. Because in my opinion, the music was just music. And there was a couple moments where the music kind of lined up, where it seemed a little bit more dramatic. But then we just go back and do 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 type things. It was just music in the background. So if you took this movie and then you just made it so it was organ music and more one thing that would have been cool is if the music in the background were all opera. That would have been epic. Now they wouldn't have been able to do that back then. But in the same way, that would have been epic to just have it so they had opera singing in the background, and you're oh, it matches what the story is about. Or have it so in these dramatic moments where you have she pulls off the mask of the Phantom, and you're this dramatic moment, and the music is just dramatic or something like that. But instead it's just do 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 do, and it just keeps going on this more cheerful music, and you're okay, you have to just rely on completely off of your reaction and movie. And this is something that a lot of people have shown is horror stories are 10 times better. Really, the music is what makes something terrifying. And someone proved this by, they take clips from horror movies and then put pop songs to it, and it doesn't come off as scary anymore. It's just funny because it has pop music to it. In the same way, because the music was really taken away from that moment, that's one problem. I'm yeah, I get that. I get it. That's of its time in that way, that's just what they did with all of those movies. But I wish they had given it more dramatic music, because then it would have made this movie even better. But one of the big things I really liked about this is that I'm personally not the fastest reader, so it meant that a lot of times in nowadays movies, I can I sometimes put on subtitles and I'm able to read along with it and perfectly fine. But a lot of times I find that in newer movies, you have to really pause the movie to properly read over what a letter says. Now, for the most part, that's because nowadays the letters actually make no sense, and you're just relying off of what people said it said, because they don't actually make it accurate at all to what it says. But in this one, because you were relying on these letters and all, and what popped up on the screen and saying what it said, for the most part, even as a slow reader, I found that I would finish off what the letter said, and it was in cursive, so I've never been good at reading cursive, but I could understand what it was saying. Or with those, titles on the screen where it suddenly just pops up, this is the phrase that the Phantom just said. I was able to read that, and then still have some time to just sit there before they pulled it away, and continued the story going. And I found that I appreciated that, because that means people who are worse than me at, fast reading would be able to understand what's going on, because they're able to read that. And if you really can't, you can always pause it. But I'm just saying, I guess I'm not the slowest reader, but I wouldn't say I'm the fastest reader. So I was able to understand what was going on, because I was able to have long enough to read what it was saying. So I really appreciated that. The action in it is somewhat cheesy, but also somewhat, a classic. Even horror movies nowadays have cheesy acting. The movie was great in that way. The design for the Phantom, I felt, was way better than what it is. In the play itself, it's good. In my opinion, it's not the best. This is way more accurate to what it actually looks like, based off of the book's description, where it talks about this yellowy skin, no-nose man. He looks exactly like what the Phantom looks like in the book. That's hideous looking creature is the Phantom. But especially in the movie adaptation, everyone makes jokes about how it looks kind of like he just has a bad sunburn. That's it. He just doesn't look hideous. There's plenty of people who would still want to marry that guy, even with his face the way it is, because it doesn't look that bad. It just looks like, okay, maybe get some plastic surgery eventually. With this one, there's nothing, with the Phantom from the book and from this version, there's nothing there's no plastic surgery you can give him that would make him look normal at all. He's just hideous looking. Another thing that I didn't like about this was, I felt the ending. The one thing I like about the play and the movie adaptation of it is they have it so the ending doesn't really have it so the townspeople find the Phantom. The Phantom just disappears again. We don't know what happens to him. But in this version, they have it so they chase down the Phantom and they throw him in the river and all. And it's kind of implied that they killed him. And in one way, that's kind of like, oh, there's no plastic surgery you can give him that would make him look normal at all. He's just hideous looking. One thing I like about the play and the movie adaptation of it is they have it so the ending doesn't really have it so the townspeople find the Phantom. The Phantom just disappears again. We don't know what happens to him. But in this version, they have it so they chase down the Phantom and they throw him in the river and all. And it's kind of implied that they killed him. That's kind of like, oh, okay, it's a classic, monster movie. That makes sense why they would have it so he actually dies in the end, like you do with Frankenstein and other monsters like that. But in the same way, I don't know. It was kind of epic about how he doesn't get caught. And I was, the whole time when he was getting caught, I was come on, get away from them. Come on, get away. Because I was wanting him. Especially I didn't want them to see him. And when they saw his face, it's like, oh, come on. And then they actually did kill him. I'm like, darn it. I would have preferred if he just slipped off into the night and it just ended with, and the Phantom was never seen again. And it's like, oh, that would have been epic. But no, they made it so they saw him, they killed him. It's like, I don't know. I kind of like the mysterious of the Phantom just disappeared, and people are like, what happened to him? Now, some of that is because with the play adaptation of it, they have it so he has a more redeeming ending where he lets them go and all. Well, in that version, he didn't let them go. They escaped from him, and then he was chased down, and he couldn't continue chasing them because he was being chased down by the townspeople. They also make it so there's no redeeming moment for him. He's a villain from the beginning to the end. He's never a good character. He doesn't have this redeeming moment of he lets them go because he truly, for the first time, actually properly loves Christine and wants what's best for her. No, he's just a monster. And there's something nice about that. There's nothing redeeming about him in the end. He's hideous until the end. Not just by his physical looks, by his personality, by who he is. He's a hideous monster. Sometimes you have this with the character, but they become hideous because they chose to be hideous, and there's not any redeeming thing about them. He didn't have a redeeming moment. He was what he was. So overall, I would say this is definitely one of those movies that I would recommend people watch, but in the same way, if you are one of those people who just can't stand movies that don't have people actually speaking, or just an old movie that has not the best graphics, and it's not The Phantom with the music and all this epic stuff to it, then I guess you don't watch it. But in my mind, it was a pretty good horror movie of just epic, not scary, but also scary in the same ways. Like, it's a different type of scary than we have nowadays, where it's all about these thrills and these spooks and all that, and that was just chillingly scary. It's a different type of scary. It was like back then they had a better, in my opinion, better way of doing scary movies. So guys, tell me your thoughts if you guys have seen this before. If you haven't, you guys can check it out. I will leave in the description where you can buy this. This is an epic set of movies. It cost me like $10 for 50 movies. Hopefully we'll get to watching some more of these over the month and give you guys reviews. I'm definitely not going to get to all of them because that's 50, and I would have to put out 2 movie reviews per day to get to all 50. But yeah, hopefully I'll get some more of these this month and maybe get to more next year. I'm also getting the whole set of all of the classic monster movies with Dracula and stuff like that. That should be coming in the mail sometime. So maybe next year I'll get to reviewing some of those. But yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. I've been looking at that set for a while, so I'm like, yeah, screw it, I'll get that too. But yeah, and then I saw this one, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this. Tell me your thoughts if you guys have seen this, and if you guys want to see it, please check it out. I'll leave, again, description so you can buy that if you want those, or I'll leave just in the description where you can watch just the Phantom of the Opera online. If you guys haven't yet, please consider subscribing. This has been the Movie Net Reviewer, Peter Weary, signing off.